Welcome to our next section, Performance Tuning. Yii is one of the fastest frameworks available. Nevertheless, when developing and deploying an application, it is good to have some extra performance for free, and to follow the best practices for the application itself. In this section, you will see how to configure Yii to gain extra performance. In addition, you will learn some best practices for developing an application that will run smoothly until you have very high loads. Let us start with our first video of this section that deals with following best practices. In this video, you will see how to configure Yii2 for the best performance and some additional principles of building responsive applications. These principles are both general and Yii-related. Therefore, we will be able to apply some of these even without using Yii2. Create a new Yii2 app basic application using the Composer Package Manager, as described in the official guide at this link. Update your PHP to the latest stable version. Major releases of PHP may bring significant performance improvements. Turn off the debug mode and set the prod environment. This can be done by editing web/index.php and adding these lines of code. Please note that in the Yii2 app advanced application skeleton, you can use the shell command php, init and opt production environments for loading optimized index.php and configuration files. Enable the cache component. Open app/config/web.php and enable cache component with these lines of code. You can use any cache storage instead of file cache. Also, you can register multiple cache application components and use Yii::$app cache and Yii::$app cache2 for different data types. The framework uses the cache component by default in its own classes. Enable table schema caching for the DB component and add these lines of code in it. Use plain arrays instead of active record objects for listing sets of elements. Use each method instead of all in for each for a large count of results. Because Composer's autoloader is used to include most third-party class files, you should consider optimizing it by executing this command in the terminal. When Yii_debug is set to false, Yii turns off all the trace level logging and uses less error handling code. Also, when you set Yii_env to prod, your application does not load Yii and debug panel modules. Setting schema caching duration to a number of seconds allows caching the database schema used by Yii's active record. This is highly recommended for production services, and it significantly improves the active record performance. In order for it to work, you need to properly configure the cache component as seen here. Enabling the cache also has a positive effect on other Yii components. For example, Yii router or URL manager starts the cache routes. Of course, you can get into a situation where the preceding settings will not help to achieve a sufficient performance level. In most cases, it means that either the application itself is a bottleneck or you need more hardware. Server-side performance is just a part of the big picture. Server-side performance is only one of the things that affect the overall performance. By optimizing the client side, such as serving CSS, images, and JavaScript files, proper caching and minimizing the amount of HTTP requests can give a good visual performance gain even without optimizing the PHP code. Things to be done without using Yii. Some things are best done without Yii. For example, image resizing on the fly is better in a separate PHP script in order to avoid the extra overhead. Active record versus query builder in the SQL. Using query builder or SQL in performance critical application parts. Generally, AR is most useful when adding and editing records, as it adds a convenient validation layer, and is less useful when selecting records. Always check for slow queries first. Database can become a bottleneck in a second if a developer accidentally forgets to add an index to a table that is being read often, or vice versa, or adds too many indexes to a table we are writing to very often. The same goes for selecting unnecessary data and unneeded joins. Cache or save results of heavy processes. If you can avoid running a heavy process in every page load, it is better to do so. For example, it is a good practice to save or cache results of parsing the markdown text, purify it. This is a very resource intensive process. Once, and then to use the ready to display HTML. Handling too much processing. Sometimes there is too much processing to be handled immediately. It can be building complex reports or simply sending emails if your project is too heavily loaded. In this case, it is better to put it into a queue and process it later using cron or other specialized tools. For more information about performance tuning, go to this link, and for more information on caching, refer to this URL. In this video, we have seen how to configure Yii2 for the best performance and some additional principles of building responsive applications.